Funny how the world keeps spinning, yet some things never seem to change. I remember when neighbors actually knew each other, when borrowing a cup of sugar didn't require a signed request form. Back then, community wasn't a checklist of violations. It meant something real: respect, connection, belonging. Maybe that's why it shook me so hard when I saw those flashing lights reflecting off my front windows like I'd stumbled into a police drama, blue. And red strobes painted the driveway as my wife stepped out of her rental car. Commander Alyssa Thompson, still in her crisp dress whites after 8 long months at sea, looked more puzzled than worried. The woman across the street, however, was another story entirely. She was red-faced, shouting at the top of her lungs, and that was my very first introduction to our HOA president, Patricia Garrison. I didn't even know her name until the officers started writing citations. That morning, Alyssa had texted me from Norfolk. "On my way home. Can't wait to see you." 8 months aboard the USS Truman had felt more like 8 years. I'd cleaned the house twice, bought her favorite flowers, and even attempted that pasta dish she loved. What I hadn't prepared for was our self-appointed neighborhood watchdog deciding my wife was a national threat. Patricia Garrison ran Cedar Heights like it was her personal kingdom. She measured grass height with a ruler. She timed how long garbage cans lingered at the curb. She once fined the Andersons $75 because their garden gnome was facing the wrong way. I'd managed to stay invisible for 2 years by following every absurd rule to the letter. But apparently welcoming home a returning Navy officer wasn't in the HOA handbook. I was in the kitchen when I heard the yelling. Through the window, I saw Alyssa standing calmly by her car, hands visible, speaking with 2 officers. Patricia stood behind them, waving her arms like a traffic controller gone rogue, shouting about suspicious individuals and stolen valor. She even claimed that real military personnel didn't just show up unannounced. I ran outside, heart pounding. The sight was surreal. My wife, who'd just finished commanding operations in the Persian Gulf, being questioned in her own driveway while Patricia demanded her immediate arrest. Neighbors were gathering now, watching from their lawns, some recording with their phones. One officer, his badge read Daniels, held up a hand as I approached. His partner, Officer Nguyen, kept asking Alyssa routine questions. She answered each one with perfect calm and military precision. "Yes, I live here. Yes, I'm returning from deployment. No, I didn't think I needed HOA permission to come home." Patricia's voice only got louder. She insisted that real military personnel would have notified the board in advance. She accused Alyssa of buying her uniform online. Then came the classic, "I pay your salary." Not once, not twice, but 3 times in under 2 minutes. Finally, Officer Nguyen asked for ID. Alyssa moved slowly, producing her military identification card. What happened next was almost cinematic. Both officers went silent. Nguyen's posture straightened. Daniel's expression flipped from mild annoyance to something close to panic. They exchanged a look, then glanced at Alyssa's rank insignia. "Ma'am," Daniel said respectfully, "my apologies for the confusion. We received a report of suspicious activity." Alyssa nodded, her voice steady. She understood they were just doing their jobs. What she didn't understand was why Patricia was now shouting about personally knowing the police chief. That's when Officer Nguyen surprised everyone. He took a step back, squared his shoulders, and saluted. "Former Navy, ma'am. Machinist's mate, 2nd class, served on the Lincoln. It's an honor." Patricia's mouth dropped open. The crowd murmured. Alyssa returned the salute with composed grace. I could see the tension finally ease from her shoulders. The power dynamic shifted instantly. The officers turned their attention to Patricia. "Ma'am," Daniels began, his tone sharp now, "do you understand that calling 911 for a non-emergency is misuse of emergency services? Filing false reports is also a crime." Patricia's face went through every shade of red in the spectrum. Alyssa stepped forward, still holding her posture. "Officers, thank you for your response," she said evenly. "But I'd like to go inside and see my husband. It's been a long deployment." She shot Patricia a firm look, the kind that could silence a drill sergeant. "Unless there's an actual crime being reported?" Patricia fumbled for her phone. The HOA bylaws, they clearly state, residents must notify the board of extended absences and returns. She scrolled furiously, muttering about community standards and proper procedure. The officers were unimpressed. One of them asked if she'd like them to review her past 911 calls, mentioning how several suspicious packages she'd reported turned out to be Amazon deliveries. By now, the crowd had doubled. I recognized most faces, neighbors who'd suffered under Patricia's rule for years. The Johnsons, fined for using the wrong shade of beige on their shutters. The Gwynns, cited because their kids' bicycles were visible from the street for more than half an hour. Everyone who'd been nickel and dimed by Patricia's nonsense was watching her finally face some real authority. Daniels pulled out his notepad. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm issuing you a formal warning for misuse of emergency services. Another false call like this and you'll be cited. Also, making false claims about military personnel can carry federal consequences. I suggest you return home and rethink your approach to neighborhood watch." Patricia's hand trembled as she accepted the paper. She tried to stammer something about her rights as HOA president, but it came out weak and broken. Alyssa handled the whole scene with quiet grace. She thanked the officers for their time and for their service, before finally walking up the driveway toward me. Alyssa shook hands with Officer Nguyen, who asked her about the Truman's latest deployment. They chatted briefly, ports, duty stations, Navy life, while Patricia stood rooted to the sidewalk, still clutching her warning citation like it was radioactive. The crowd began to drift away, though not before a few neighbors called out, "Welcome home!" Mrs. Chen, 2 doors down, even broke into applause as the police cruiser pulled off. Patricia finally found her voice. "This isn't over," she hissed. "The HOA board will hear about this. You've violated multiple bylaws, and your grass is probably over regulation height." Alyssa turned to her, calm and unshaken. "Ma'am," she said evenly, "I've spent 8 months dealing with actual threats to national security. Your tape measure doesn't scare me." The silence that followed was perfect. We went inside, leaving Patricia standing there, still gripping her useless piece of paper. Through the window, I watched her stomp home, nearly tripping over the Andersons' properly positioned garden gnome. Alyssa dropped onto the couch and let exhaustion take over. "Some homecoming," she muttered with a tired smile. "At least you didn't have to face enemy fire," I joked. She chuckled. "Enemy fire's less unpredictable than suburban politics." By evening, the story had spread through Cedar Heights faster than a yard sale rumor. Texts flew from house to house. The neighborhood Facebook group, usually Patricia's personal soapbox for lawn complaints, erupted with laughing emojis and celebration posts. Someone uploaded the video of Officer Nguyen saluting Alyssa. Within an hour, it had 47 reactions. For the first time in years, Cedar Heights actually felt like a community instead of a minimum security facility run by one woman with a clipboard. But Patricia didn't surrender quietly. She spent the rest of the day stomping from house to house with that same clipboard, trying to rally support. Most doors stayed closed. The few that opened did so out of politeness. Brief nods, tight smiles, before gently shutting in her face. I watched from the window as she stood on the Petersons' porch for 10 full minutes, ringing the bell while their car sat in the driveway and their TV glowed through the blinds. They simply refused to acknowledge her existence. By sunset, Patricia had resorted to stuffing typed letters under everyone's doors. Her official notices, printed on what she clearly thought looked like HOA letterhead, demanded an emergency meeting to discuss what she called a hostile military takeover of our peaceful community. She cited 17 different bylaws, none of which were real, and threatened legal action against anyone who supported the illegal coup against her rightful authority. She even implied that Alyssa's military credentials were suspicious and should be reported to Homeland Security. But the next morning brought poetic justice. At 7:30 sharp, Dr. Harrison, the mild-mannered, retired pediatrician who'd served on the HOA board for years, knocked on our door. He looked both embarrassed and relieved. Behind him stood 4 other board members, Mrs. Foster, the bakery owner, Mr. Ramirez, who'd fought Patricia's attempted ban on wind chimes, and 2 others I recognized from past HOA meetings, They stepped inside, and Mrs. Foster handed Alyssa a cake she'd baked that morning, the icing spelling out, "Welcome home, Commander." Dr. Harrison cleared his throat. "We convened an emergency meeting at 6 a.m., he said. Every board member received complaints about yesterday's incident. The vote was unanimous. Patricia Garrison has been removed as HOA president, effective immediately, but that wasn't even the best part. They'd reviewed her history of 911 calls, 37 false reports in 18 months, claims of terrorist activity during the Kumar's family reunion, allegations of drug dealing when the neighborhood kids sold lemonade, even a report about loitering when Mrs. Chen's nephew visited from college. Dr. Harrison held up his phone. "The city fined her $500 for misuse of emergency services," he said. "The police department's reviewing additional charges for harassment and false reporting." And then came the twist nobody saw coming. Patricia's employer, a local law firm, had been sent the viral video of her berating an active-duty military officer. The firm, which proudly displayed "Support Our Troops" decals on its front windows, was mortified. We didn't have to wonder what happened next. 3 days later, a moving truck pulled up to Patricia's house. She tried to maintain her usual commanding posture, barking orders at the movers while clutching a box labeled "Kitchen Miscellaneous" in shaky handwriting. But it's hard to look powerful when half the neighborhood is coincidentally doing yard work just to watch you pack up your kingdom. Gardens were trimmed, lawns mowed, driveways swept spotless. Everyone wanted to witness the fall of Cedar Heights' tyrant. When the last box was loaded, Patricia made one final stand. She marched straight to our door, shoulders squared, chin lifted high. I opened it, and she thrust an envelope into my hands. "A bill," she announced coldly, "for grass height violations dating back 2 years. Total owed, $3,200. I looked at the paper, then at her, then at Alyssa, who joined me at the doorway. Patricia's hands trembled as she waited for our response. Alyssa studied the document for a moment, then smiled, that calm, unbothered Navy smile that could sink a battleship. "Ma'am," she said softly, "you're absolutely right. Some of these measurements do exceed HOA standards by 1/8 of an inch. However, since you're no longer HOA president and since you were removed for cause, this document has no legal standing." She folded the paper neatly. "But I'll keep it, as a souvenir of your dedicated service to our community." Patricia's mouth opened and closed, words failing her for once. Then, without another sound, she turned and walked away, the last of her belongings already loaded into her car. The moving truck pulled off. Someone started clapping. Then another joined. Within seconds, 40 neighbors stood on their lawns, giving Patricia's departure a full standing ovation, her frustrated shriek as she sped out of Cedar. Heights was the last sound we ever heard from Patricia Garrison. If you've ever had to deal with a nosy neighbor or a rule-obsessed HOA president, go ahead and hit that like button. It lets us know we're not alone out here. And if you love stories where justice finally pulls into the driveway, don't forget to subscribe for more tales from the suburban front lines.